I'd just like to do a quick note on who our speaker is today, and then I'll turn it over to him. So Clive describes himself as a vintage UX person, inspiring public speaker, and aspiring mental health advocate. He has over 15 years of experience helping digital agencies, in-house teams, and direct clients from Adobe to Zalando. He currently works as an experience design lead for the proudly independent agency Moccu in Berlin. And so, with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Clive.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you very much. And you'll let me know if everything works okay. And as we agreed, at 10 minutes, just feel free to interrupt me so I roughly know where I am, because these 20 minutes might be a challenge. We'll see what happens.
Okay, I'll let you know when it's 10 minutes through.
Okay, so first of all, is it all good now with the screen? Hello, hello.
Looking good.
Looking good. Excellent. I think the only thing that was a bit weird was this here, and then I'll try it again. Then you haven't got the app node. Okay, still good?
Yep, still good.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for inviting me, Anna and Jeff, and thanks so much for everyone for turning up tonight. Yeah, so the talk is on mental health in design and tech. The unofficial title is actually The 7 Habits of Highly Depressive Designers. Number 5 will blow your mind. Before we start, a short disclaimer and a trigger warning. So I'm definitely not a medical professional or a qualified therapist. Today, I'm going to share a bit of my own personal story and journey, tell you a bit about the learnings, observations I've made on the way. And there might be, although this is a very personal and earnest topic, there might be some bits of humor baked in. So I'd urge you, if you're currently not in a great place, in a bit of a dark place, and you could be triggered by discussing mental health issues or even notes of suicide, maybe this talk is not the right thing for you today. And you can just leave, I think, no questions asked. Other than that, if you like the excessive use of Venn diagrams, you might actually enjoy tonight. So let's jump right into my story. I'm Clive, based in Berlin now for the best part of 11 years. And as you might have known, this is an absolute UX paradise. Everywhere you go, you can collect wonderful wireframes. Just around my corner, I've got the most beautiful user path you could think of. I enjoy a bit of ground hopping, that's collecting old school football grounds. And I'm really one of the happiest persons alive when I can travel and sample some local specialities, like here, for example, in Lavery's yard in Belfast. So I think you could say, generally, I'm a man of simple pleasures. And to set the tone a bit for my own story, so we're in 2019, at the beginning of the year, after some around about 4 years of freelancing, I joined Adobe in a business development role on the XD team. And my partner and myself, we're heading to California to have a nice holiday. After that, I'll be jumping into the Adobe Max conference, giving workshops and being there as a representative of the company. Here's us looking rather pleased with ourselves in the wonderful wine valleys of California. I think I'd definitely give it a 5 out of 5 as well, just like Elisa here. In LA, my team and myself, we stayed at the Interconti. We had some really nice views as well, some cool food. Oopsie. I'd give this another 5 out of 5. See, it works. Yes, I'm with Christopher here. Definitely another 5 out of 5. And by now, I've sort of reached a stage in my career where companies actually paid me to point on a screen or onto something on the stage. And I've even been featured in publications like Usability Blog, like as some of the 21 UX experts to watch, which was a bit cringy, to be honest, but also stroked my ego. So I think by conventional methods or conventional metrics, this can be considered a successful career up to now. But you'll never guess what happened next. Fast forward onto March 2020, and my accommodation and culinary standards had slightly declined. This is Vivantes Hospital in Kreuzberg, in case you know it. So it's, while I like some brutalist buildings from the outside, I wasn't quite prepared for what awaited me in the inside. And I'm a bit more, the effects. Try it one more time. What a shame. Well, Ali gave it a 1 out of 5 and said, "This is the worst hospital ever. If you want to kill yourself, make sure to go here." What happened? So in March, I actually became unbearable to be around. I was really a toxic person for my partner and our unborn child. And it was thanks to her persistence that I admitted myself to the accident and emergency department of said hospital. This was an absolutely horrible place, but it was really a last resort, as I described before. We sort of came at a breaking point that I needed to be somewhere else. And after weeks and weeks of getting wrong diagnosis and as a highlight being shouted at in the morning by psychiatrists, I just couldn't take anymore and admitted myself to the so-called crisis station at this place. There he is, Ali. I'm more with Ali on this. But how did I get there? Maybe we need to look back on that wonderful California trip once again. And there were some other memories that I just could not get out of my brain. So first and foremost, there was sickening scenes of poverty, obvious substance abuse and mental health issues wherever we went. So if I left my Interconti hotel, I literally stepped over people that were left to rot on the street. Anywhere we went, from the shiny office in San Francisco and had a nice expensive coffee or meal, there were these abject scenes of poverty that just sunk in. All the beautiful places that we visited on our road trip before Max had also been affected by the wildfires, and some of the places actually burnt down or were very close to be burnt down. So while literally across us, all the world was on fire, I was sat in a hotel room and prepared a workshop on a prototyping and design tool. And somehow this didn't feel right. There was even talks of Adobe Max to be called off due to the horrible wildfires that year in LA. At the same time, my employer created some lovely campaigns with the Ocean Agency and Pantone to save the coral reefs. While at the same time, my own carbon footprint of flying alone was round about 3.5 tons to date, and that was all these client meetings, customer workshops, evening dinners, and so on. And it felt to me, this is a far cry from my own self-image that I'd like to portray of myself. I've been on stage quite a few times as well, talking about how we could use our skills for social good, how to be a digital do-gooder, moving from hipster-centric to human-centered design. And I felt somehow there was a gap here. Also, all this flying and my love of traveling had really been replaced by just being stressed out. And also all these last-minute taxis, unhealthy snacks in between customer and client meetings really had a toll on my mental and physical health. At work, I was in a role that I didn't really enjoy as well. I felt I was spending more time in Excel than in XD, and thoughts in my head kept creeping up of being a traitor to UX, having imposter syndrome despite getting quite good feedback from my peers. I just started getting cynical about work and my role as well, and got more and more secluded about what happened there. Outside of work, there were ugly pictures of ugly people popping up left, right, and center. And they also made me angry, sad, and fearful of the future. I think this illustration by Liz and Molly nicely sums it up. This was pretty much where I was at in early 2020, I'd say. Bit by bit, my operating system kept on getting updates that I just couldn't toggle off. It all started with insomnia, not being able to sleep for weeks and weeks, and turned into all of these symptoms that you can see here. Rumination was one of the worst things. So I woke up maybe at 3:30 in the morning and just couldn't get thoughts out of my head. Every time I thought in worst case scenarios, there was anxiety, sadness, mixed with negative self-talk that was just going on. But I was still in denial because, hey, I'm Clive. I've got 15 years of experience as a UX designer. I've got all my methods. I'm being paid as a problem solver, so I'll probably be all right at the end of the day. It's hard to believe it when you see me now, But instead of actually binge eating these troubles and thoughts in my head away, I just forgot to eat. So literally my partner had to remind me at the end of the day if I'd eaten something. And often I just forgot and was not myself. I was like in a rabbit hole, concentrated on my own thoughts and forgot about the most basic things. Maybe it wasn't all bad if you look at me now, but this was definitely something unheard of so far. Also, outside of work, there were a few life events that really didn't make me much calmer at this state of mind that I was in. And while still in denial, nasty symptoms kept on being added to my OS. I really isolated myself. The fears got worse and worse. I felt empty and restlessness at the same time. And I think the overarching feeling was something of being numb, like not really feeling anything, not very negative or not very positive. It was just like I had I don't know, like I would have a black cape over my head, and I couldn't even cry, although I felt like crying. It was just a feeling of numbness. Again, another nice Liz and Molly illustration. That sort of sums up nicely how I felt. And even things that should have been a highlight of my career, like manning the Adobe booth at Interaction 20 in Milan. As the emails started piling in, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I couldn't function in the most basic ways. So no way I'm going to make it there. This, of course, added to my feelings of guilt and shame. Guilt towards my peers, towards my colleagues, but also shame towards my family and friends that I had isolated myself from. And by the beginning of March, this sort of affected my whole personality. All my passions and interests were gone, really. The empathy that I thought I'd always had was just switched off. Being half English, sort of having some self-deprecating humor, was usually a cure in shitty situations. When I felt I even lost that, I knew there was something really serious. But on a positive note, at least I didn't want to kill myself. Because I had a friend who committed suicide some years ago, and I was sure it was never going to get that bad ever. Also, while in hospital, it was at the absolute height of COVID, which of course did not exactly help to calm me down or give me sort of all the safety and security and calmness that I would have needed in this situation. Therapy was reduced to an absolute minimum, and I was left to my own devices. I could walk along the canal, so I wasn't locked in, but there was nothing open. I couldn't meet friends and family somewhere for a coffee or a drink to exchange some niceties. So I was really left feeling sorry for myself, walking up and down the canal and doing a lot of doom scrolling, not knowing what the fuck is happening outside and inside at this moment in time.
We're about 10 minutes in, FYI.
Thank you. So incidentally, the only actual thing that helped me to get to sleep was a sleep-inducing drug called Tavor, which, fun fact, is also the name of an Israeli assault rifle, quite aptly. And you shouldn't, you have to be really careful with Tavor. So you should not stop taking it too quickly, because this could get some really negative side effects on your brain and some sort of withdrawal symptoms. You might have guessed it, this is exactly what happened. And adding to all the other symptoms, I actually, for the first time in my life, had some suicidal thoughts on like a trip being withdrawn from this drug. I didn't actually plan it or try to go through, but just having these thoughts first time in my life were really, really scary. We haven't got so much time, but if we look at my story, from April onwards, I was on a road of recovery, definitely. But recovery, I can assure you, is paved with some horrible UX nightmares and service design nightmares. Nevertheless, you can definitely get out of it, and you will get out of it with the right help and the right treatment. This is what recovery really looks like. Obviously, we all know the famous design squiggle. This is a quite good representation of a road to recovery. It's nothing like a perfect double diamond or design thinking process. You get some really horrible experiences. And you'll experience some things, oopsie, That should help you along the way. Hang on, these animations took hold of me a bit too much. Excuse me. We're getting there. There were some things that really helped me, as you can see here. So it was really helpful, just trust the process, take some baby steps, and was actually things as well that really helped me to get out of it. At the end, it was a mixture between some medication and some therapy. Also, if this experience was good for one thing, it helped me realign a bit on my own KPIs and OKRs. And I think while this is not a perfect pie chart yet, it looks a bit more like this at this moment in time. So it's still work in progress, but it really helped me to realign a bit with my own values and what I thought was important in life. Some learnings along the way. First of all, for the first time in my life, I actually reflected on what health means and what mental health could mean. So I looked at the World Health Organization for a definition, and this is what it says. I like the poignant point that indeed there is no health without mental health, and that our mental health is a state of well-being where we can actually realize our own abilities and can cope with the normal stresses of life and actually be making good contribution to his or her community. So I thought it's a nice way to ground as well and to frame what mental health actually is. It's also included in the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. It's something that I've learned as a sub-target for a good reason. If you look at the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization as well, there's a lot of intertwined things that would lead to a staggering projection of what mental health conditions would mean very soon. And I can assure you, you're definitely not alone. Statistically, if you're around a 40-headed company, there's a good chance of around about 10 team members struggling with some form of a mental health issue. It's also important to notice that everybody has mental health, and it actually exists on a continuum. So you might feel better at certain stages in life. There could be events or a series of events that would get you from healthy to ill, and you could go back again. It's never finished. It's never a finished process. You haven't got a mental health for life. It exists on this kind of continuum. So as we know, it depends, and there's different interventions that you can take at different steps of this continuum. What it also taught me, there's lots of interdependencies. So really, this is sort of the cognitive triangle taken from CBT therapy. We're always in sort of a triangle of our thoughts, our emotions, and our behavior, and they do always have dependencies between each other. And it depends on which diagnosis you would get. I'd say there's about as many mental illnesses as there are design titles. We saw early on, there's quite a few designer titles. And there's actually not only one reason to get it. This is called the biopsychosocial model of mental health, which just makes it clear there's so many contributing factors to your mental health, your mental wellness, or your mental ill-being. And it would be very wrong to just say, oh, he's got a depression, so he's got something wrong in his brain, or it's genetic. It's almost a mix of all these things, and everyone will have their own will have their own story, no matter who you talk to. It depends, as we know as UX people. There's also so many overlaps in symptoms and diagnosis that it's really tempting to self-diagnose yourself, but actually it's important to have someone professional look into it to then give you a proper diagnosis and the proper interventions. As you see here, depression and anxiety share a lot of symptoms in the middle, but yet they differ at some stages. And I think what we've witnessed a lot as well is this bad boy here, the burnout, which is actually not its own condition. You wouldn't get written off sick for burnout. You would always have some main diagnosis, but it's a risk factor related mainly to chronic workplace stress and other symptoms that you can see here. And oopsie, these animations have got me a bit. It's often, don't let me down here. Yes. Damn. What I wanted to say here is basically it's often they come together as well. So you wouldn't only have one thing. You often have a comorbidity, as they call it, of a depression, maybe some bits of anxiety, with some nice bits of burnout thrown in. So you might have one diagnosis, but you could actually share a lot of other symptoms as well. And there can also be a lot of other underlying conditions that might be undiagnosed. For example, there you go. For example, ADHD in adults is roughly around about 5% of adults have this undiagnosed ADHD, which, if it shows its ugly sides, can also lead to depression in around about 60 to 70% of the stage. And actually, we also know the topic of neurodiversity. There seems to be quite a lot of people within our community that could suffer from such a deficiency, for lack of a better word, as we see Jessica here. Yet, it's still a sad state of affairs, and we've got our work cut out. I won't read everything to you here, but there's still a lot of shame and stigma attached in wider society and also within our work environments. Which also leads to comments like this that I recently found on LinkedIn, which I found awkward for a person who wins businesses for clients through TikTok, who might not be able to operate a search engine to see if burnout is actually a real thing. I hope I made my point clear. It is a real thing. Some observations along the way, aka the 7 habits of highly depressive designers, and I'll whiz through these a bit, knowing our time issues. First of all, again, rest assured you're not alone. This is out of a Slack conversation by someone who's engaged in systems thinking and doesn't really know if this helps or worsens his conditions. If we look around Twitter, a lot of our heroes and people we look up to openly say they have some have had some mental health issues. Here's Brad here in a dialogue with Paul. Ali opening up to some to some of her illness issues. Torsten, you might know, who's actually talked about this before as well on some events. JC, the same. All really seasoned design people, some maybe minor celebrities on Twitter. And just like Harley, I've also seemed to have noticed some habits on myself or in myself and with my peers within the design industry. I've also talked around about 30 people so far, and there seems to be some patterns and behaviors that might not be so helpful when it comes to our own mental health. So I think, first of all, it's our job to overthink things. I mean, we tell ourselves the mantra, always ask why 5 times. And if you're not in a good place mentally, this could actually be rather, could not really help your condition and could make things worse. For example, there was some value in just going with the flow, trusting the process at the stage I was in. But nonetheless, I think our natural position would be to think things through, get to the point of it, overanalyze maybe, and that's what we're paid for. We're problem solvers. Also, I think we're often our greatest critic. I have never met any designer in my life who's totally happy with their portfolio a few years down the line. And this perfectionism can also be a denominator for anxiety, procrastination, depression, and so on, and other mental illnesses. Because it can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse, specifically if life throws other things at you. I don't know who this is from. I think it's from the Founder Institute. I think we often identify a bit too much with our jobs as well. So we really tell Tom, Dick, and Harry about how we are empathetic, how we are advocates for the user. And we have a ton of empathy for our users and clients, but I think we often forget about ourselves in that equation. Oopsie. Sometimes our priorities might not be set straight as well. And I think we had a dark mode question in Butter as well. That was one of the first questions. And maybe in the true hierarchy of needs, we might just love our tools a bit too much at times. So we know all about a breakpoint on a screen, maybe not so much about breakpoints in our own brain and our own mental health. There we go. We love our tools too much. I'm very guilty of this one as well. We actually love what we do, maybe a bit too much. Maybe we're going to join that other community, set up another community, go to that workshop, hold that workshop. I mean, Jeff could probably tell a story here as well. Organize another service jam in your free time. And then we might forget to actually take some time off to really relax. As of all of this, I'm very guilty of all of these. Also, I think somehow as an industry and design folk, we can be quite prone to self-exploitation. So this is not to single out one particular company, but if hustling is so much part of your values, I think you might need to reassess your values a little bit as well. Nonetheless, really good companies with good output, with cool designers working there. Number 7, I think we really often try to meet impossible expectations from our stakeholders or to ourselves. And as a bonus, that's 7, but because we're in Berlin, I'll give you 8 and 9. It could be sometimes as well that we maybe worship some unhealthy heroes. They might be really great people in their field, and no denial here what Niels and Norman have done so far. But I don't know if you've seen the recent controversy about their job opening, and also Don Norman bragging about his day rates to a junior designer. I think these also might set some unpleasant, sort of unhealthy examples of human behavior as well. And also, I'm with Mauro as well. On a darker note, maybe sometimes we take ourselves a bit too important and love our methods just that little bit too much. So this was a rough overview of things that I sort of seen, and maybe there was little bits of my story that you thought might be missing. So first things for all, I'm back to the good life. I think this person came into my life. He's already on a good way. He loves his wireframes. He loves cool records. Oopsie, and he also likes the odd drink, which you can't see here now. This whole journey made me also dig a bit deeper and actually recently certify as a so-called mental health first aider. I did it through the Mental Health First Aid England organization, which envisions a society where mental health is accepted as a normal part of life and everyone has the skills to look after their own and other people's well-being. I think there's hardly a more human-centered vision to follow. So this is something that I'm looking much more into. You're basically like a first aider for normal health. You don't give a diagnosis, you're not a doctor, but you can help people and steer them in some right directions. I've done this quite a few times with some people, and there's feedback like this, of course, which really, really touched my heart. And I'd also like to extend this invitation. So if you're in Berlin and if you fancy a walk or a talk in total privacy, just hit me up after the talk, or we can arrange an online session as well. Also been working on some workshops on the topic. I started with a nano one at Hatch, and there'll be more to come at the end of the year. So also get in touch if this is something you might feel interesting. And to wrap it all up, some personal top tips. Again, I'm not a medical professional. These are Clive's top tips. Always go to a proper professional to analyze your own situation. But I think it's really always important. Do reflect on your own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and learn how to reflect. Do not fall into this trap of believing everything you think, because thoughts maybe can just be thoughts, and if you're in a bad way, they can set you up for some bad feelings and wrong behaviors. Educate and self-assess yourself. There's many self-assessment tools on the web which can sort of give you an indication. I'll share some with you as well later on. But don't rely on self-diagnosis alone. But you could take this self-assessment to your first doctor's appointment, and that can be really helpful. What helped me as well is really get out of denial and don't think you're so clever. You have to practice radical candor, not only to your clients and your peers, but also to yourself. Don't let it escalate, otherwise you can fall down a really bad rabbit hole like I did myself. And don't be too proud to reach out for help. Depending on where you are on this continuum, you might be okay with some methods, but if you're at the far end like I was, do not try to tackle it on your own. You really set up to failure. And take all the time you need. Don't treat it like a design sprint that can be done in 5 days and follow some pre-described way of doing it. Be slow and mend your mind, and don't move fast and break your brain, like we may be taught in our day-to-day to move fast and break things. Also, it's a good time to reflect on your own personal OKRs. maybe they're more important than that of other people's or your company's. And again, very personal. I know not everyone wants to or can have kids, so this is just a bit tongue in cheek. Remember, it's my personal top tips. I would recommend to have a baby, and don't kill yourself. This is not a good idea. This comes to the conclusion of my talk, I think. So I'm happy for you to ask me anything. Please don't ask me if designers should learn to code. I won't answer that one. But other than that, I'm really happy to touch on anything. And oh yeah, these are workshops. This was from another slide. Your feedback really means the world to me. We'll share the presentation later, and you can scan this and maybe give me just 2 minutes of feedback, what you thought of this talk. This would really mean so much to me. But now we can go back to Q&As, I think.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing with us today. Yeah, I am going to take off I'm going to close your slides now so we can have a bit more conversation. And if anyone would love to, you can queue up if you want to ask your question out loud in a speaker form, like hear your voice, or you can also input your questions into the chat as well, and we can talk them out loud as well. Jeff, can you spotlight me as well? Thanks. Yeah. Oh, okay. Wonderful. We have a question. So, Anubaha. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but yeah, feel free to ask your question.
Thanks, Clive. Thanks for such a great presentation.
Thank you.
I would like to ask, I'm myself a career changer and it's not been long. I'm in the design field. But you feel that when you see your teammates, you see others, and you also see on LinkedIn everywhere, you feel kind of pressure to just learn more and more. And I did this myself. I used to work, and after that I used to do some challenges or something like that, and that is kind of constant pressure. How to overcome that? Because I still feel I don't know much because I don't have a degree. I just did a boot camp and then I changed my career.
Yeah, I think, well, I've definitely been there as well in the beginning of my career. And I can assure you, people, even if they do it 10 years or 20 years, they still don't feel they know all. And your imposter symptoms might just change from thinking, oh, I don't know enough about this, about, oh, am I a good leader? Am I a good colleague? So this general feeling, I think, will never go away. Again, I don't know you personally, so I'm not in a position to tell you, oh, start exercising, buy a dog, or split your time 70-30. But it's probably just a thing of balance as well. I mean, this is a very general explanation. But I know design is great, and you can really dig deep into it. And all these UXdesign.cc articles, Fountain Institute, and so on. You could do nothing else than just dive deep into this. And I'm very prone to this as well. But yeah, learning, and this is coming from a massive procrastinator himself, yeah. But learning to really set priorities, look into where you really want to look deeper, and not try to cover everything at the beginning. And I guess if it gives you a kicks, I would be the last person to recommend you not to maybe throw an all-nighter and go into this thing, but just find a good balance of it as well, and maybe not spend every weekend after every weekend doing that. I think this is very general advice. So finding a balance as well, and then setting maybe realistic goals, pushing yourself by all means, but not going crazy and breaking your mind while doing it. I hope this helps. I know it's a bit general, but that's what I would say to it without knowing you anymore.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. The idea of the imposter syndrome is definitely something that's real, feels really real. And I feel like I've had this conversation a couple of times recently with people where I'm like, it never goes away. And that's
Never.
good to hear. And I think for me, what switched is when I kept looking at people I look up to who are 10 years further, 20 years further in their career than I am, and they still say they feel imposter syndrome. And I kind of reframed it for myself as like, I'm pushing myself into an area that I'm growing in. And so it can be growth too. So it's okay to feel like you don't have the full picture of something. But as again, that's just my perspective, my take on it. We have a question here from Anna as well in the chat. which says, do you have any tools you suggest to help with your mental health, i.e. apps, books, or games? We're kind of chatting a bit about the no device area.
Yeah, before. Yeah, I haven't showed that yet, but at the end of the slides that will be shared with you as well, there's some resources. And I'm actually collecting, that's not ready yet, but as you do, you can set up a Notion with all your resources. And that will be, I think we're by the end of the year, don't want to put myself under too much pressure, but I'm sort of really having a collection of resources that I'd share with you. There's some useful things, I hope, in the appendix of the slides. Also, if you're in Germany, there's sort of a search engine for so-called DIGAs, which are health apps that your health insurer would pay for, and that can help you. They wouldn't replace therapy necessarily, but they are a good bridge if you need proper therapy, or they can be a good sort of good method, maybe not to fall into darker places if you take these things. And there's also some other resources. There's one book that I can really recommend to everybody. I won't share my screen now again. It's called Why Has No One Ever Told Me This, by a lady called Julie Smith, who's a bit of a star in the UK apparently. And she really's got this good way of giving bite-sized advice. And she's a psychotherapist of, I think, 12 years, in a very, very accessible way. You can also follow her on her socials. She's got a real knack for it, I think. And this book is also very helpful. I'd recommend that to anyone on a sort of low level. But there's more resources, as I say, at the end of the presentation, and I'm constantly collecting more. So feel free to connect or follow me. And as soon as they are there, I'm going to share them openly as well.
Awesome. That's great to hear that. I'm sure there's a lot out there, and once you kind of start digging, it just opens up even more. And people
it's a wonderful, for all the horribleness it really had, it opens in a fantastic rabbit hole. And it's actually quite nice to be a beginner again as well in a field, which actually also, if you think about therapy, which I found, there's a lot of correlations and similarities as well, how a therapist would maybe approach me. I often felt like, oh, hang on, usually I'm at the other end asking these questions to clients or maybe to juniors. So it's a fascinating field, definitely.
Yeah. We have another question in the chat from BC. They say, thank you for your honest account of your journey. What one thing has helped you reconnect with your sense of purpose?
Yeah, I think the obvious cliched answer would be my son, for sure, when he came into this world 2 years ago. But also the moment I sort of got out of it and dug a bit deeper, this whole experience just didn't let me go. And I thought, yeah, this is a epic design challenge that will probably stay with me for all my life. But it also made me think, hey, maybe somehow I can use these skills to then really do something good and not only talk about it, but I actually do something. So I think, yeah, this sort of set my mission a little bit as well. So I really wouldn't want anyone from our industry or from anywhere to go to a place like arrive at a place where I was. So I think my own experience and getting out of it, but also knowing when I felt totally hopeless and thought this is never going to end, or this cannot get any better. Really, you can get out of it, and you will get out of it with the right help. So I thought that sort of reconnected with me as well.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that part of it. And I feel like there's so many things in here that I feel like I connected with as well. And I've struggled myself with mental health over the years. And so I think it's just helpful to hear someone speak honestly about it and feel like you're not alone in this situation. And especially the 7 tips or the 7 areas, like they were funny, but I also was like, okay, this makes me not feel crazy. Like it makes me feel that I can see where some of this stuff is coming from as well. I'm wondering if, like, as you could also talk about how maybe from a manager's perspective or somebody who is working with other designers, if there's a way that you think about the mental health and how you can kind of support or not hinder that area for people you're working with as well.
Yeah, I think this whole notion of psychological safety, which means there's sort of a culture of mistakes being okay. There's a culture of saying, I don't know, and that's fine as well. You won't be judged for saying I don't know or I don't know yet. Yeah, this whole tagline of work-life balance or being a family-friendly place to work. I'm very fortunate here because half of our employees have got families and they know what it's like if there's something wrong there. But just to actually live that as well, and not only say it on your job ads. I think what this mental health first aider thing is really good for is to maybe just spot some signs in people and just start a conversation, and you can offer it, ask open-ended questions, and then signpost them and direct them to proper help, because that would never be your core capabilities, and you shouldn't overstep the lines as well. You're not a psychiatrist and you're not a doctor, but you can help people, and just assure them if you want to chat, I'm here for you. We can take it totally private, and I think that's sort of an environment as well.
Yeah, I think I love when you said the psychological safety and creating an environment where it's okay to be wrong and it's okay to not know, can really kind of.
There's also some really great services now. Like there's a Berlin, it's not even a startup anymore. I think it's called Nilo Health, and there's others as well. That's sort of where you can outsource your mental health stuff if you feel it's a bit out of your depth, which can be well possible even as an HR person or a manager. And you buy like credits for real therapy sessions. I think 6 or something, and it costs around about 20 euros. So I'm not being paid by them. It's just the one that comes to mind. And you would have other meditations and exercises in there. There's plenty of others. Again, that will be in my resource list as well. You could think about investing in something like that, because I think the return on investment, I guess, it's hopefully obvious from the statistics and numbers I've shown. That's also a possibility. But maybe one last thing one thing I'd say, because we've talked a lot about this, putting, optimizing yourself and looking for ways for you to tackle it. If you're in a toxic environment, there's no way you can meditate your way out of that, or you cannot sprint your way out of that, or therapy your way out of that. So I think often these discussions are about this self-optimization and, this maybe slightly Californian, always be a better version of yourself, which can put you under pressure as well every day. But obviously, if we apply systems thinking, we're all part of something bigger and it's all intertwined. So while it's good to learn tactics for yourself, it's the environment as well that shape us. And if they suck, then your mental health will suck, or you will thrive in it and maybe become a horrible person.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to leave it there because I think that's a really wonderful note to end on, and to think about where the kind of system that we sit in, and also that sometimes that is out of our control too. And so depending on what that looks like, maybe taking yourself out of that system sometimes can be the first step forward in a way.